Hello traders, this is Godswill Mocha here. You can also call me Forex Evangelist, and welcome to this weekly Forex forecast from Bullish Trade Forex Trading Academy. And how we are going to be doing this is discussing geopolitics, looking at fundamental data, macroeconomic analysis, combining it with sentiment and obviously technicals on the chart. And then, discussing with some currency pairs, which, we are going to be discussing here, and our outlook and what to expect, in them, during the week. For a disclaimer, this is not a signal, this is our own view and bias on the financial market coming into the new week. Okay. So the first thing we usually do is, going into our Excel sheet where we have our macroeconomic data. And what I usually do is, pair the first three strong currencies against the last three weakest currencies. And how we are going to be doing that, looking at AUDCAD. And then we combine that with sentiment and also look at, geopolitics, how geopolitics is going to be having some sort of play and influence in these currency pairs. So when we look at AUDCAD in terms of sentiment, what do we have for AUDCAD? So for AUDCAD, sentiment is telling us that there's an uptick. All right, this is in terms of commitment of traders, institutional position orders. So from 9.96 to 47. So we are seeing institutions also confirming what we have. Sometimes the sentiment doesn't align, but we always try to follow the macro flow. All right. And but now in terms of geopolitical view, what is something that is telling us something different. Not really something different. Now, Trump is giving about 48 hours, all right, which is running down less than 48 hours at the moment of recording this video for Iran to have a deal, or all hell will be let loose on the Iranian regime. And if this, goes out to continue, maybe a possible ground invasion of Iran and possibly seizing of the Kaya gas land and Iranian oil, the Canadian dollar is expected to appreciate because any factor that is going to cause crude oil prices to rise, Canadian dollar is going to gain because Canada is one of the major oil exporters in the world, as well as Australia, which is one of the second or third largest LNG exporter in the whole world. So it's also going to be impacting Australian dollar and Canadian dollar. This is in terms of the geopolitical stories. But when you look at the macro data, you could see AUD is ranking ahead of the Canadian dollar. So this could be, the difference in the move, right? So, but regardless of what happens, we are bullish on AUDCAD. So what I'm looking at for an AUDCAD in terms of structural flow analysis. After this, so we are looking for this corrective structure to be done here. When it's done, we're going to be looking for an upside. And after that, we could get one more push to the downside and then upside again. So altogether, what we are looking at for this week on AUDCAD is a push to the upside. Okay, that is for AUDCAD. So we move on to our Excel sheet next and see, what we have next. So AUD, remember how I said we do it. Now we are going to be looking at AUD Swiss. So from reports during the weekend from Bloomberg, Switzerland is one of the currency countries that is suffering the most, because of this Middle East tension in terms of oil crisis. All right, because the focus is saying that around this April or by May, European nations will begin to feel, the heightened effect, of this Middle East tension in terms of crude oil shortage, and they are already feeling it. France is the number one nation on the list, followed by the UK. Okay, and Switzerland is also on that list, around the fourth or fifth nation, feeling the tensions in the Middle East in terms of energy shortage, crude oil shortage in the country. So now, if we look at AUD Swiss in terms of sentiment, what do we have in terms of sentiment? So for AUD Swiss, a little decline from 14 to 3. Like I said, sometimes sentiment may not matter better, but we also, use that as a caution as well. But in terms of macro bias, I'm also bullish on AUD Swiss. So what am I looking at for an AUD Swiss? So also for AUD Swiss, any complete corrective structure here, price expected to push back to the upside, probably taking away these highs and potentially even this high for AUD Swiss. Okay. That is for AUD Swiss. So we'll go on to the next one on our watch list, which is GBP AUD. So if we go to GBP AUD and see what we have in terms of sentiment, what is the stance of the institutions on GBP AUD? So when we go there, we'll see that GBP AUD went from 3 and now is at a positive 1. Still on the bullish side, but a little bit of decline, okay, in terms of its positivity. So, but remember I told you, macro bias is the number one thing. And if we look at GBPAUD, we'll see that GBPAUD has been pushing to the downside currently as of since last week. You know, this little up move recovery is based on the hope we're hearing as of last week or maybe last 2 weeks about the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz and the possible end to the tension, a de-escalatory statement. But the market now wants action. The market is tired of words. Okay. So for GBPAUD, we are looking for a move to the downside. So this move to the downside can continue, giving us a push downside again. Or even if we get an up move, another downside again will be coming. So altogether, what we are looking at for in GBPAUD is a move to the downside, okay? In terms of not only just macroeconomic data like we have seen here, but if we also look at if we see more escalation, which that is possible, I feel the current rescue of the two airmen that was shot down in Iran, inside an F-15E, and then they are rescued. I think that could give the United States military some sort of confidence to carry out a possible ground invasion, and I think that is imminent. And if that happens, Europe is going to be suffering more from the energy crisis because they are dependent on oil that passes through the Strait of Hormuz. But like I explained as well, AUD is going to be benefiting a whole lot from it because they are one of the major exporters of LNG. So if LNG prices are high, it means they are going to be making more money. Oil companies in the country are going to be making more money, and vice versa for the government as well. So that will give AUD a whole lot of strength. All right. So the next one we now look at USD. Okay, so against what? CAD. So if we go to sentiment, what is sentiment telling us in terms of USD CAD? So we can see USD last week was +4 and now we're heading to +37. Okay, and in terms of fundamental geopolitical bias as well, both currencies are expected to be favored, but dollar is going to be favored more. Now, in terms of macro team, geopolitics, US dollar is an oil exporting nation, so they are benefiting from the oil crisis currently. And not just that, they are also getting a whole lot of safe haven appeal. Remember, it's during period of uncertainty. So I think USDCAD is positioned to the upside. So let's go to USDCAD quickly and see what we have technically. So for USDCAD, all I'm looking for is a move similar to what has happened there, a corrective structure, a three-wave structure. Like here, we've got impulse, correction, impulse. So here is a clear three-wave structure. Let me go down to the 1 hour time frame. So we can see that structure clearly. So if we go down to the 1 hour time frame, you see exactly what I'm referring to here. So for USDCAD, we have got on this downside a similar move to this. So what we're anticipating is a corrective structure similar to what we have seen here, and then downside again, similar to what we have seen here. And price will proceed to give us the fifth wave of the wave 3 in the bigger degree. Those who understand wave analysis will definitely know what I'm talking about. Okay. So that is it for USD CAD. So let's go to our macro scorecard to continue. So the next we have is USD Swiss. So similar thing we have. So let's look at sentiment to see if that is also in play. So we are not getting that up push, from +9 now to -5. But regardless, I'm favoring the macro bias and also the geopolitical advantage currently that USD has over Swiss, okay, because the decline is not much. So when we look at USD Swiss and we're already seeing what is happening. So for USD Swiss, what I'm anticipating is a possible corrective structure here. If we have a clear corrective structure, price is expected to push back to the upside for USD Swiss. So for USD Swiss, I'm bullish on USD Swiss. So when we go to our macro scorecard again to see what we have next. So here, we have next going to be going at GBP USD. Okay, and when we look at that, what is GBP USD giving us? GBP USD is still, slightly bullish, okay, in terms of the sentiment. But if we see more de-escalatory tension, like I said, GBP USD is meant to be pushing to the downside, and that is what I'm anticipating for GBP USD. Anytime soon, an up move may be coming, but I don't think that is ready at the moment yet. Even if it's almost ready technically, but fundamentally, I don't think we are yet at that. So we may have a slight corrective structure, downside again, or maybe an up move and then downside again. And this downside, we expect it to take away this current lows here on GBP USD. Okay, so for GBP USD, I'm looking forward sell setups. All right. So next on our watch list, we now look at Euro as against CAD. EURCAD is one of the currency pairs that have been taken advantage of since last week. But technically, I'm beginning to see maybe, it may start coming to an end, regardless of the strength in the euro. We may be seeing some kind of weakness, which is going to be caused by if we have a possible de-escalation, because I can already see that technically on the structure, but we need to see that geopolitical play. Because when there is a oil crisis, one of the regions that suffers a lot is Europe because they're heavily dependent on crude oil. Right, a whole lot of sectors is going to be affected. So even if you trade equities, that is stocks, one of those sectors that is going to be affected. You look at airlines because jet fuel will become expensive. You begin to see decrease in demand. A whole lot affects the European economy. So when we look at the sentiment, what institutions are doing in terms of EURCAD, we could see that they are still bullish. So EURCAD from -1 to +34. But I'm going to tell you in terms of technicals what could be happening, especially if we see more escalation in the Middle East tension. Okay, so now for EURCAD, what we have seen here so far is a five-wave structure: impulse, correction, and then an impulse. So this structure from this point to this point is technically completed. So what we're anticipating now is a corrective structure. But now, following what is happening, see, we see that sort of escalation, then definitely we are going to now turn, our bias into more of a geopolitical play. So what are we anticipating in terms of EURCAD? So for EURCAD, we are looking for a push to the upside. Here, price is giving us a clear three-wave structure. So after this, we're anticipating price to move to the upside. So let's say if we come and see more tension, more escalation, this is going to be costing EURCAD after this up move to push to the downside for EURCAD. So that means if we go for this up and then we see any sort of escalation, in the current tension, we are going to be looking for a sell setup, regardless of what sentiments and what macroeconomic is showing. Because in that scenario, geopolitics is going to be a kind of overshadowing whatever you have in terms of your macro bias. So you always need to understand context when it comes to the financial market, because context is what drives the financial. Look at context. What are investors and traders looking at? What are they looking at to drive, their money flows, their investments, around the world. So that is what is going to be probably driving at the financial market if we see that escalation. Europe is going to be suffering, and then CAD is most likely going to be heading, strong, and that will cause the EURCAD to head to the downside if that happens. So altogether, what am I trying to say? On the short term, look for EURCAD to the upside. And then if we see that geopolitical play coming into place, EURCAD is most likely going to fall to the downside. And falling to the downside can even take away these lows around the 159,400 levels. We could even see take out that low if that geopolitical play happens. Okay. So the next we have here is this is Euro. We have a Euro Swiss. So in terms of sentiment, what do we have in terms of sentiment? So from 2 to -9. So and which Euro Swiss is one of the currency pairs I personally took advantage of last week to the upside. So and uh in terms of the geopolitical play now coming into Euro Swiss, Europe suffers more than Switzerland during this kind of crisis and tension. So what are we going to be looking at for in the Euro Swiss? So for Euro Swiss, I'm most likely going to, stay out of Euro Swiss for now. But if I'm ever going to look out for any opportunities, maybe it's going to be a selling opportunity. After this up move, price is expected to push back to the downside. But maybe I will just stay on the sideline. I prefer to trade EURCAD to the downside because of, the advantage it's going to be having if we have an escalation. So I'm most likely going to, be out of Euro Swiss for now. Okay. So what do we have next? So next, we now have EURGBP. So EURGBP is the next one. And what do we have in terms of sentiment? So in terms of sentiment, we're having from negative 15 now to negative 14. Still on the negative side, but a little bit of an uptick. So if we go to the chart technically now to see what we have for Euro GBP. So for Euro GBP, what I'm looking at for is a similar move to what we have seen here so far. Here we've got an impulse, a corrective structure that came in the form of a contraction. Okay. And then impulse again. Now we're having, here we're expecting a correction as well, impulse. So any, clear structure here, downside again, we are going to be looking for the last push to the upside. Okay. Euro GBP, anytime we have a crude oil crisis is expected to push the downside. Why? Because Europe suffers a whole lot, during the energy crisis compared to the UK. But the UK, and immediately we started hearing that news of hope of the escalation. Euro GBP started pushing back to the upside again. So let's see what happens. So if we have a an escalatory situation again after this up move, we could also see Euro GBP, regardless of the macro bias, pushing back to the downside. Okay. So altogether, what am I trying to say? After this corrective structure is completed, potential up move first, and then you see that escalation could be seen, a rapid move to the downside on Euro GBP. Okay, and what the market is actually focused. So when you begin to see American pilots and Israeli pilots begin to see, hit desalination plants and energy plants and other infrastructures and potentially seizing Iranian cargo land and the Iranian oil. The cargo line is sort of an Iranian, crown jewel that handles 90% of Iranian crude oil exports. So if that happens, we're going to see crude oil prices skyrocketing, and gold could possibly, be heading more lower again. Why gold is heading lower is because of context, which if you follow me on YouTube and Instagram, I explained the reason why gold has been falling since the beginning of the war. Because some traders will ask the questions, but there's an uncertainty. Why is gold falling? So if you go to even on my personal Facebook, Instagram, and even on my personal YouTube channel, I think I explained it there. And you also follow me on LinkedIn. I think I also explained that on LinkedIn, the reason why gold has been falling. Okay, so that is all I have for you this week, traders, and I want you guys to be on the right side of the market, trade carefully, and also trade with my recommended broker at Godo Capital Market. All right, so they offer fast deposit, fast withdrawal, safety of your capital, regulated with tier 1 regulatory bodies around the world. All right, so that is all I have for you, traders. So leave your thoughts in the comment section. Share this video to more traders, which is going to be very helpful. All right, so if you're also interested in our online mentorship, so you can also indicate in the comment section. Let me see how interested you guys. This is something we want to come up with, an online mentorship that's going to help traders really understand how to trade the financial market, because the knowledge in the financial market removes fear. All right. When a lot of traders talk about trading psychology and all of that, trading education and the right knowledge in the market is really what matters. Always understanding how to combine fundamental geopolitics, sentiment analysis with your technical strategy can give you a very powerful edge in the market. So thank you very much, guys, and see you next week. Bye for now.